into the White House. He was not joking, and in fact, he brought it up in the next meeting we had.
This is a silent coup. These guys, if you ask me, ought to be the ones in jail. They ought to be the ones under investigation.
They're calling it President's Day protests. More than 240 actions across the nation.
Can you say definitely that California will be filing a lawsuit?
Definitely and imminently. It's clear that this isn't an emergency. It's clear that in the mind of Donald Trump, he needs to do something to try to fulfill a campaign promise.
He's going to protect his national emergency declaration, guaranteed. This is a threat in our country.
This time, Denny Hamlin wins his second Daytona 500 and wins it for Coach Gibbs in Toyota.
And the whole
defense for the entire game. It was 180 to 176 or something. What was final score, Ted? Do you know? Yeah, it was, LeBron's team won.
There you go.
Yeah, that was the only thing going on this weekend.
I
there
didn't watch
was a big interview last night.
Oh, yeah, that.
There was that. We're going to get to that as well. Welcome aboard. It's President's Day. It's a federal holiday. We will have trivia sprinkled throughout the program. Let me query the both of you. Who was our shortest president?
Shortest?
I would say
Garfield.
James Madison.
James Madison is correct.
Really?
5'4".
Did you know that?
That's why they named the street.
He was a small guy, yeah.
Yeah, he was a little guy.
Yeah.
That's all.
All right.
We
We're
have
a little
lots
smarter
more.
today.
So anyway, happy holiday.
All right, good, and happy President's Day. Meanwhile, lawmakers are bowing to get to the truth. Did you watch this last night? Andrew McCabe's jaw-dropping 60 Minutes interview.
The fired FBI deputy director detailing inside efforts to push our president out of office.
Which is not exactly the way it's supposed to happen. Griff Jenkins is live in Washington with the so-called attempted coup. And a number of people have said it was a coup. And what he described yesterday sounded like a coup.
Good morning, guys. It was quite an interview. The former FBI director says he was fired for opening an investigation against the president of the United States, a decision which he says was fully supported by a Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. And McCabe accuses Rosenstein of offering to wear a wire to collect evidence against the president.
The Deputy Attorney General offered to wear a wire into the White House. He said, I never get searched when I go into the White House. I could easily wear a recording device. They wouldn't know it was there.
Now, questions are being raised as to just how serious that offer was. McCabe says it was, quote, absolutely serious, but the DOJ, who did not respond to last night's interview, previously acknowledged the conversation last year and described it very differently, saying it was more sarcastic. But McCabe wasn't done throwing his former colleague Rosenstein under the bus, saying that it was his idea to attempt to use the 25th Amendment against the president.
The discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort.
When asked by 60 Minutes' Scott Pelley how that discussion of the 25th Amendment came up in conversation, McCabe says he honestly could not remember. McCabe has a new book hitting bookshelves this week, guys.
Does indeed. All right, it comes out tomorrow. Griff, thank you very much. If you were watching the interview on 60 Minutes, you probably were saying to yourself, as we were just now during the soundbite, why didn't Scott Pelley ask this, or why didn't he ask that? You get the feeling Scott Pelley has not been paying attention to what's been going on in our nation's capital for the 2 years, where it has been revealed all the things that happened at the Department of Justice and the FBI would have been great questions, but Scott Pelley never asked them.
Well, and he might have. They might have sat down for 2 hours, 3 hours, and then they just had to shorten it into 28 minutes or 30 minutes.
Well, but the thing is, Ainsley, if he did that, then he would say the counter side would be and list those things and then move on. Maybe
you did want to learn more about it because it was just little nuggets.
It reminds me if you only watched CNN or MSNBC, you might only ask those questions, but you might ask yourself, yourself in between this, Andy McCabe. What role did this dossier play in for you to launch this investigation? Right. And is it true that it was, these are the things he listed for the reasons why they launched the counterintelligence operation. The Lester Holt interview, because of Michael Flynn. Right. Also, Trump was talking badly about the Russia investigation, and then he fired Comey. And there was a sense of panic. We had to do something quickly.
Right. Well, and so he says he ordered 2 investigations into whether or not the President of the United States is essentially colluded with the Russians or was a Russian agent or anything like that. There was no evidence. There was zero evidence he had to base that on. And in fact, when James Comey appeared before Congress, he said, yeah, when I left, before I got fired, there was absolutely zero evidence of it. Nonetheless, the big thing that grabbed all the headlines was about the conversation, could we get rid of this president with the 25th Amendment? And something we told you on Friday was 25th Amendment is very specific. It talks about how you need the cabinet, you need the vice president to do it. You don't do it at the FBI. You don't do it at the DOJ. Yeah. Rush Limbaugh says this was a silent bureaucratic coup. Watch.
We're losing sight of what happened here. People unelected simply because they don't like a guy's hairstyle or like where he came from decided the American people's decision was invalid and began a systematic process to get him thrown out of office. This is a silent coup. These guys, if you ask me, ought to be the ones in jail. They ought to be the ones under investigation. What they have done working with agents from the Obama intelligence agencies is simply unprecedented. This is one of the greatest political hoaxes that has ever been perpetrated on the people of this country.
And this Rod Rosenstein thing is interesting because I don't know how Rod Rosenstein goes to work today. I don't know if he is off on President's Day. We'll have to look into that.
Federal holiday.
But I don't know if he should be out there on Tuesday. Because if you listen to Jim Baker's interview that he did and it's been released behind closed doors, he says Rod Rosenstein was not kidding when he said I was going to wear a wire. There was no sense of kidding around when he said that. McCabe says he was going to wear a wire. And they even mentioned that somebody actually went out and did a preliminary who among the cabinet would turn on the president, and speculation it was going to be on General Kelly, and believe it or not, Jeff Sessions. You would think Tillerson would line up there, since we know he called the president an idiot. So at least 2 of these people, they got to that point. So how could Rod Rosenstein continue to say, I was kidding around about wearing a wire?
He said Rosenstein even said, they never search me when I walk into the White House. Yeah. I could wear a wire, I could get in there easily and do it.
How does he go to work today?
But then McCabe said, I wasn't actually considering it. He realized that was absurd for him to even suggest that. He says, but then he tells Scott Pelley he decided to go to general counsel to find out if it would be suitable for him to wear a wire.
And the guy almost had a heart attack.
Exactly. He said then he picked himself off the floor and he said, that's a bridge too far. We're not there yet.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing, going back to Scott Pelley needed to ask some follow-up questions or just some enterprise questions. And it was like, when you look at the text messages, what was the insurance policy? Strzok and Page talked about the insurance policy in Andy's office. These are questions that we never saw asked because we still have questions that have not adequately been answered about what the heck was going on the 7th floor of the FBI.
You got to think that Mike Wallace never would have let any of that go. He surrounded a story.
Well, that was one lane. We do talk about the story every day, so, if he'd like to come on our show, we have a lot of questions.
Well, in other news, in response to the president declaring an emergency declaration, you have a lot of people that are against this, and so MoveOn.org has organized protests all around the country. You can go on their website and put in your zip code and find out where the closest protest is.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we're done at 9. Maybe we could go.
Wait for me. I get off at 12.
This is all in response to the president's national emergency declaration on Friday, where he said we're going to reprogram $8 billion to build that wall that I promised you. Stephen Miller, who is one of the president's best speechwriters and senior advisor, said this about the president and how he wants to protect our nation.
He's going to protect his national emergency declaration, guaranteed. This is a deep intellectual problem that is plaguing this city, which is that we've had thousands of Americans die year after year after year because of threats crossing our southern border. We have families and communities that are left unprotected and undefended. We have international narco-terrorist organizations. This is a threat in our country, not overseas, not in Belarus, not in Zimbabwe, not in Afghanistan or Syria or Iraq, but right here. And if the president can't defend this country, then he cannot fulfill his constitutional oath of office.
So there will be President's Day protests all across the country. If you're interested, MoveOn.org.
Right. But the
so
question
does rally list.
So Stephen Miller came out and made a strong argument. Chris Wallace with tough questions. But if you look at what's happening at our border and think that it can't be addressed and it's not an emergency, my sense is when you have 120,000 unaccompanied minors that came here in 2013 and Barack Obama says this was a crisis, we have even more than that. Why isn't it a crisis now? The question is, why hasn't this been addressed in the past? And these last three presidents should have been declaring this. That's the big question. Well, why is this president the first one to say this is a problem? I spoke to someone over the weekend who's working at the border, and he's saying that it's even worse than he could even have thought as he is serving right now because he was asked to as one of the 1,000 plus who were asked to go to the border.
The president's tough talk, though, on our southern border is working. And the New York Times, in fact, even verified that because you've got you look at the story, and it said with Trump's tough deterrence, many asylum seekers give up at the border. Talks about all the people who showed up in the caravan. A lot of those people have decided, wait a minute, I don't want to wait in Mexico. I don't like that idea.
It says they've given up. More than 1,000 have accepted an offer to return home by the Mexican government, and another 1,000 have decided to stay in Mexico accepting work permits.
All right. The one thing I would say is we start on 22 miles of wall this week. That was the money was given back in 2017. And overall, this number was given out of Texas. 200,000 illegals have been arrested over the last 7 years for 500,000 crimes. All these things, we have crime in our country, I get it. But anything that comes across our border illegally is preventable. And that's what the president's trying to say. Let's stop the preventable crimes.
Not a crisis, not an emergency. So many people in the country say. The president, though, disagrees.
Yeah, 5 states preparing to file suit against the president. He expected it. Now it's legal game on.
Yep.
All right.
All right, let's hand it over to Jillian, who has some headlines for us. Hey, Jillian.
That's right. Good morning. And we're following a story out of Virginia. So let's start with this. A manhunt is intensifying for a man suspected of shooting a Virginia police officer. Officials consider Jonquel Maurice Gray to be armed and dangerous after he allegedly shot and injured an officer during a traffic stop. The driver of the car surrendered as Gray jumped into the driver's seat and drove away. The car was later found abandoned. The wounded officer is expected to be okay. 24 illegal immigrants are under arrest accused of knocking down a border fence. Agents near San Diego tracking them down after discovering tire tracks near the broken barrier. They also found an abandoned truck. Customs officials say aging border fences were dismantled and driven through twice this month. President Trump heads to Miami today to give a speech on the crisis in Venezuela and the dangers of socialism. The South American country has recently erupted with political unrest. Meanwhile, during a trip to neighboring Colombia, Florida Senator Marco Rubio pressured disputed Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro to stop blocking his borders and let much-needed U.S. aid into the country.
All right. Thank you very much, Jillian.
Thanks, Jillian.
All right, 13 minutes after the hour, Joe Biden slamming America, the United States of America, all the way from Europe.
The America I see values basic human decency, not snatching children from their parents. It makes us embarrassing.
Go to Munich and say that. Congressman Michael Waltz, former lieutenant colonel, served our country and says Biden is the one who should be embarrassed. He explains why next.
Plus, actor Jussie Smollett's story about an attack keeps changing every single day, and we are live in Chicago with the new twist in that investigation coming up.
Speaking to a European audience at a conference in Munich, former Vice President Joe Biden criticized America's policies, especially those on refugees. He called that an embarrassment.
The America I see values basic human decency, not snatching children from their parents or turning our back on refugees at our border. Americans know that's not right. The American people understand, please, because it makes us embarrassing.
Embarrassing. Here to react, Florida Congressman and Green Beret Commander Michael Waltz joining us from, as you can see right there, if you know the skyline, Jacksonville. Congressman.
Thanks, Steve.
It's an embarrassment, our refugee policy, according to the former vice president.
Well, I'll tell you what's embarrassing, Steve. I mean, this was just the height of irony coming from former Vice President Biden, who, with the Obama administration, presided over the largest refugee crisis coming out of Syria since World War II. Over 10 million people a quarter of the Syrian population displaced or internally are having to leave. So what happened there? I mean, the Obama administration turned a blind eye, withdrew from Iraq, caused al-Qaeda in Iraq to transition to ISIS. At one point, they had a caliphate the size of Maine, with an economy the size of Austria, massacring civilians, the Assad regime gassing its people, Russia, which, by the way, was in that very same conference that Biden attended in 2009 to hit the reset button with Russia. Then you have Russia deliberately bombing hospitals, bombing refugee camps, and weaponizing refugees into Europe, knowing that ISIS will infiltrate them with all the attacks that we saw. So it's just really incredible for him to be so sanctimonious when he presided over such a disaster in the Middle East that caused such a refugee crisis in the first place.
It wasn't just the refugees. He also said our trade policies are self-defeating. But I don't remember the Obama administration going after our trading partners when we were getting the short end of the stick like this president is.
Well, you know, that's absolutely right in the sense that, look, for these trade policies, we have been in a trade war for the last several decades, and particularly with China. China has been in a trade war with us. It's been taking advantage of us. This president knows it and is taking it head on, whether it's the theft of our intellectual property, whether it's the theft of our technology, or whether it's taking advantage of American workers and businesses through unfair trade practices. So I think for the United States to actually stand up for itself isn't embarrassing at all. But, you know, Steve, if I could just make a point,
Quickly.
you know, when you're abroad at conferences like that, you're an American first.
Exactly.
You're not a Democrat or Republican. You got to stand up as an American. Our opponents are taking note.
Politics always used to end at the water's edge, not anymore.
That's right.
Congressman Michael Waltz joining us from Jacksonville. Sir, thank you very much.
All right, thanks so much.
All right, meanwhile, what a story this is. Jussie Smollett's story about being attacked keeps changing every day. We're live in Chicago with new twists in the investigation, and why our next guest blames the media for jumping the gun. New questions this morning out of Chicago as two brothers there reportedly say Empire actor Jussie Smollett paid them to stage a hate attack. TMZ reports the case could go to a grand jury. Jeff Paul is live in Chicago with the latest on the investigation. Jeff?
Good morning, Steve. Yeah, police here in Chicago aren't confirming any details surrounding that possible grand jury, but what they are saying is they want to speak with Smollett surrounding some new details that have come to light. Now, this is after some more questions have surfaced regarding the validity of this alleged attack. And this is something that the actor himself has spoken about in detail publicly, most recently on ABC.
I see the attacker masked, and he said, "This MAGA country," punches me right in the face. Who says Empire? This MAGA country ties a noose around your neck and pours bleach on you. And this is just a friendly fight?
Now, Smollett gave that interview shortly after two brothers from Nigeria were arrested. The two men, though, are said to be familiar with Smollett, with at least one of them reportedly working on the set of Empire. That's the show that Smollett stars in. But those men now have since been released, and police didn't file any charges.
They're tired. They're glad that justice prevailed for them. They put the work in, and I'm glad to say that they're on their way.
Now, Smollett's lawyer released a statement saying that Smollett himself has been further victimized by claims that he played somehow a role in this alleged attack, but they say anyone saying that is lying. Steve?
All right, Jeff Paul reporting live from Chicago. Thank you very much. All right, Brian Ainsley.
All right, as Chicago police shift their investigation into Jussie Smollett's claims, our next guest is calling out the media for their initial response.
Bethany Mandel is a contributor to the New York Post, and she joins us now to explain. Good morning to you, Bethany.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, you said this story couldn't pass the smell test. What are some of the red flags?
I mean, what weren't red flags? So he was walking through the streets of Chicago during a polar vortex. It was the coldest snap in Chicago's history. And someone apparently recognized him from Empire, a show that is not universally popular. He's not Brad Pitt we're talking about. Knew he was gay, because that's because they recognized him. And they started screaming epithets, including MAGA country, in Chicago. Chicago. That's not exactly MAGA country.
Right. And now what do we think? They happen to be carrying around bleach.
Oh, yeah. I mean, don't you carry around bleach at 2 a.m.?
And they happen to be two black Nigerians.
Yeah, bleach at 2 a.m. with a noose, just hoping that they would run into someone that they would recognize from Empire.
So let's also talk about what else we know. It looks like they were paid about $4,000 each is the speculation. It looks like they know they had the receipt from when they bought the rope. It looks like he's claiming that Jussie Smollett actually paid for the rope.
Yeah, I mean, it was really laughably badly planned from start to finish. And this is sort of what happens when an actor writes his own plot. It is filled with nothing but holes.
You know, and some of these reports say that they did a practice run days before. Now, I do want to say that Smollett is not considered a suspect, and they have not confirmed, as the reporter said, anything about the grand jury, but they're saying he's not a victim. So there's so many holes in this story, and hopefully it'll all come to light. What do you think about the media rushing to judgment with this? You had Senator Cory Booker on January 29th. Last week, a few weeks ago, he was saying, this is a vicious attack on actor Jussie Smollett. This is what he tweeted. It was an attempted modern-day lynching. And then he was asked, after all of this has come to light, what he thinks about it. And now he's saying that he doesn't want to rush to judgment. His quote was, there's information that's still coming out. Listen to this.
I'm going to withhold until all the information actually comes out from on-the-record sources. We know in America that bigoted and biased attacks are on the rise in a serious way. And we actually even know in this country that since 9/11, the majority of the terrorist attacks on our soil have been right-wing terrorist attacks, the majority of them white supremacist attacks.
Bethany, what's your response?
It's really frightening to me that our leaders are so gullible that they would fall for a story this outrageous and that they wanted it to be true. It wasn't ever plausible. It never sounded like it was true from the start. And the fact that they employed no critical thinking skills to consider the fact that, maybe this isn't the entire story, and instead they ran with it because they wanted it to be true. I think that's such a sad commentary on the state of our society that we want there to have been a hate crime in order to employ it.
If this guy made this up, he could be looking at 3 years in prison. And the fact that he doesn't want to talk to the cops anymore and he's lawyered up goes to show you where this story is heading.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and he also didn't offer them his full phone records. So, this story right from the start, and I think that the Chicago PD knew that. If they didn't place out sort of an alert when they first got the report that they were looking for these guys, they knew something was up right from the start.
Kamala Harris has jumped to conclusions as well, and the president said it was a horrible attack because he took him at his word. Looks like we shouldn't have.
Yeah, I mean, it was very clearly not something that made sense at the time. And what's really frightening is that they continue to sort of pursue it because they wanted him to be right. They wanted to be able to use this as a way to bludgeon their opponents.
All right,
Bethany.
Bethany, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Andrew McCabe says that Rod Rosenstein wasn't joking when he offered to wear a wire.
He said, I never get searched when I go into the White House. I could easily wear a recording device. They wouldn't know it was there. He was absolutely serious.
Dan Bongino says that interview was incredible for all of the wrong reasons, and he joins us live next.
Plus, get ready to set sail with Dorothy, Blanche, Rose, and Sophia. Aww. The Golden Girls cruise coming to a port near you. Your heart is
All right, welcome back. It is President's Day. Dan Bongino is joining us from down in Florida. Fox News contributor. He was a New York City cop, a Secret Service guy. He wrote a book called Spygate, and he was watching television last night as Andrew McCabe, the #2 guy for a while at the FBI, then became the #1 guy acting. What did you make of him revealing that he and other people were talking about how do we get rid of this Donald Trump using the 25th Amendment, Dan?
You know, Steve, if you watch that interview with open eyes and open ears, and that did not scare the hell out of you about the power of big government, and you still insist that the swamp doesn't exist, then you didn't watch the same interview I did. What was laid out last night was clear. Again, anyone watching with clear eyes, was a coup attempt on the President of the United States. the discussions about using the 25th Amendment to remove President Trump from office, something Andrew McCabe and Rod Rosenstein would have no role in whatsoever. That's about physical or mental incapacitation. Right. Clearly, it doesn't apply here. Mm-hmm. And then a discussion about wearing a wire in the White House. I mean, if this was serious, this was a coup attempt. There's no doubt about it.
Hey, Dan, for folks at home that didn't get to see it last night, let's show some clips from it, and then we'll get your reaction.
Discussion of the 25th Amendment was simply Rod raised the issue and discussed it with me in the context of thinking about how many other cabinet officials might support such an effort. It was really something that he kind of threw out in a very frenzied, chaotic conversation about where we were and what we needed to do next. The Deputy Attorney General offered to wear a wire into the White House. He said, I never get searched when I go into the White House. I could easily wear a recording device. They wouldn't know it was there. Now, he was not joking. He was absolutely serious.
Dan?
This is really unbelievable. I mean, think about what we're talking about here. Ainsley, he never described last night during the entire interview, Andy McCabe, any predicate facts to be investigating the president at all.
No evidence.
Think about this. No, Steve, it's been described multiple ways now. These infamous predicate crimes. They've been described, I wrote them down. They were described last night as articulable facts. Articulable meaning you can articulate them, which he didn't. Remember, Jim Comey described them to Brett Baer as a mosaic of facts. That was cute. That was fancy. Remember, was it John Brennan who described them as a, what did he say? He was, the corpus of intelligence. So it's a corpus, it's a mosaic, and they're articulable, but nobody's articulated them or produced anything.
Well, this is what he listed.
Described the crime.
He said, so Scott Pelley leaned in as if he's never heard this before. And he said, well, what are the reasons? He said, well, he told James Comey to drop the case on Mike Flynn. No, he said, go easy on him. He's a good guy. And Comey came back and said he's a good guy. NBC, the interviewer Lester Holt, because he brought up one of the reasons I fired Comey was because of the Russia thing. And because he also said Trump was talking badly about Russia investigation. And he said on this North Korea situation, he said one time, he said that Vladimir Putin said North Korea does not have the missile technology to reach our shores. And I believed him. He took that collection of evidence and said, we have to overthrow the president.
You see, I've known you long enough, 7 years now, Brian, that I knew that's what you were going to say. I'm not kidding. That's why I said predicate crime. Those were all post-investigation. Comments made as a result of Trump being investigated. Brian, if I investigate you for a bank robbery you didn't commit, and then you go and make comments about this non-bank robbery to your neighbors, I can't then justify my investigation into the bank robbery because of your comments about a robbery you didn't commit. There's no predicate crime. They never described one time Trump did anything he did in advance to collude with the Russians. Guys, this is the MacGuffin of politics. Remember Pulp Fiction, the golden glowing suitcase? We all hear about it, but we see the glow, but we never see what's in the suitcase. Trump collusion evidence is the MacGuffin of politics.
Well, you know what, Dan? He could have said, well, you know, we had this dossier that we had handed to us by an Oppo research outfit on behalf of the Democrats. He could have said, we had that, and that had a whole roadmap of where to go. But he didn't say that because that would have been silly.
Hey, Dan, Adam Schiff, Congressman Adam Schiff has opened up an investigation, as you know. This is what he said about collusion.
You can see evidence in plain sight on the issue of collusion, pretty compelling evidence. Now, there's a difference between seeing evidence of collusion and being able to prove a criminal conspiracy beyond a reasonable doubt.
Plain sight.
When is somebody outside of this network going to put Adam Schiff on the record and get a yes or no? Are you ever going to produce this evidence? Adam Schiff is tearing the country apart. This is the sleaziest member of Congress. He has to know. This is not a dumb guy. It's not. I mean, it'd be an easy insult to throw it. He's not stupid, Adam Schiff. He's a smart guy. He knows there's no evidence of this. And Steve, you just brought it up. The only quote, air quotes, the dreaded air quotes we have here of collusion evidence is the dossier, which is fake. It's a debunked document. And Andy McCabe, to double down on your point, Steve, is one of the few guys on the record actually already admitting the entire spying debacle on the Trump team and the FISA warrant would not have existed without said dossier.
But real quick on Adam Schiff, Dana Bash did do a good job yesterday because she said if Robert Mueller comes up with this case and doesn't conclude what the Senate concluded, that there was nothing there, would you drop the investigation? And he basically said no. And she's like, why? The $30 million spent, they'll probably get to $50 million by the time they're done. All the grand jury, all those assets, and Adam Schiff is going to do a better job than Robert Mueller. Just be ready. If Mueller's thing is not what they want it to be, that they're going to shift this whole argument.
Brian, it's because they're not investigating a crime in search of a person. They're investigating a person, Donald Trump, in search of a crime. That's the exact opposite of what should happen in law enforcement in a constitutional republic.
All right. Joining us from Palm City down in